Choosing the President of the United States is not the only key decision American voters will have to make. What else lies ahead for the American voter? We tell you all about it in our weekly special show on US election. Hello and welcome to WION VOA co-production. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. Now, just a handful of tight races around the country will also determine if Republicans hold on to their 53-seat majority in the Senate. Here's one particular race that will have far-reaching consequences for the country's political agenda. VOA's Congressional Correspondent Katherine Gypson reports on the choices facing American voters in several key states. Let's have a look.
State Senator Cal Cunningham, one of many Democrats across the nation running to unseat sitting Republican senators like his opponent, Thom Tillis.
I grew up with strong parents and humble people and humble places.
With its mix of rural, urban, and suburban areas, North Carolina is an ideal indicator of the nation's political mood.
North Carolina is very much a microcosm of the nation as a whole, because our state is very bitterly divided. It's that last sliver of persuadable voters that could flip from one side to the other that really makes North Carolina as competitive as any place else in the country.
Polls show Cunningham leading Tillis by about 5 percentage points. President Trump is playing a key role in this race.
The national dynamics plays out here in North Carolina, particularly for the U.S. Senate race, just because Thom Tillis was so closely aligned to President Trump before COVID. But when COVID hit, he kind of started to tack more towards the middle, not really talking about Donald Trump.
The coronavirus is also a key issue in Iowa, where Republican Senator Joni Ernst,
we thought we had seen the worst,
is locked in a debate with Democratic challenger Teresa Greenfield.
We're facing a crisis like nothing we've seen before.
Over the severity of the pandemic, a sign the national dynamic will play more of a role in the Senate races this election cycle, analysts say.
We're waiting to see how folks either defend the president in his handling of the coronavirus pandemic or whether they're trying to distance themselves a little bit, and that'll depend on how much it's impacted the state.
In Maine, Susan Collins is familiar with national attention after her high-profile vote confirming Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh and acquitting Trump in the impeachment trial earlier this year.
The Postal Service is a lifeline.
She's running behind challenger Sarah Gideon, who raised millions of dollars criticizing those votes. But in Alabama, President Trump's support for Republican Tommy Tuberville giving him a double-digit lead over Democrat Doug Jones, who will likely lose his seat. Democrats also hope to win seats in Colorado and Arizona. They will need to pick up 3 seats if Biden wins, 4 seats if Trump wins.
So you just heard that. The battle to control the U.S. Senate is heating up. What will be the impact? Let's get in some analysis from Voice of America's Nova Purwadi, who joins me live from Washington, D.C. at this hour. Hey, Nova, great to see you again. Hope you're doing good. Now, Nova, perhaps the congressional races, including the House of Representatives and the Senate, don't get much coverage outside the United States. But wouldn't you agree that they are equally important irrespective of who ends up winning the White House?
Well, yes, Akansha, like names like Susan Collins that we mentioned in the previous report, and also Cory Booker, Tom Cotton, Lindsey Graham. These are not household names for many of our international audiences. Even Mitch McConnell, who controls the legislative agenda at the Senate, he's also not really a household name, perhaps, in many households for our international audiences. But these are some of the senators who are up for re-election this year, along with the presidential elections that happen every 4 years, where this year it's going to be on November 3rd. There will be also congressional races. All 435 congressional districts for the House of Representatives hold polls, and also roughly a third of the Senate seats of the Senate seats that total 100 are going to be voted on. And for this year, there will be 35 Senate seats which will be voted on by voters as well. Now, what's interesting about these Senate seats is that they also show how politics, national politics even, are so local. People in Maine don't necessarily think about flipping the Senate or what their vote will mean for national politics, just which representative represents their district, their state, the best in the U.S. Senate. This is also the case in Kentucky, where Mitch McConnell is also facing re-election with a competitive challenger there from Democrats. And of course, some of the Democrats or even Republicans there might think about national politics, but they're also thinking about local politics and how they've represented their state. Also, the impeachment trial recently in earlier this year showed how a bitterly divided Senate failed to convict and also to remove President Donald Trump. And so that is also shows how the Senate, even though it doesn't get that much coverage overseas, is also playing a key role also in legislation. We also saw during the last years of the Obama administration, he was hampered by the House and the Senate in Republican hands, that he couldn't even nominate his own Supreme Court justice when an opening came up, Akansha, a few months before the elections. Merrick Garland, which he tried to nominate to the High Court. And so certainly not really seen overseas that much, but certainly an important race to follow, Akansha.
Absolutely. And hearing from you, I can just make that out, how tight this race is. It seems like the entire battle between the Democrats and the Republicans is heating every week as we get closer to the race. On that note, Nova, also the sudden passing of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a progressive justice in the highest court, also highlights the other branch of government, the judiciary. How will this impact the U.S. voters?
Well, the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was certainly an icon to many. She fought for women's rights, minority rights, and also immigrant rights. So she is seen as a very iconic, liberal, progressive figure. Her passing will mean that if the Republicans have enough votes and if they can confirm President Trump's nominee in time, then her replacement will likely be someone of a more conservative bent, if not very conservative, considering President Trump's previous appointments. Now, why this is important is because unlike the Supreme Courts in other countries, in India, I believe the Supreme Court consists of 33, 34 justices, whereas in the U.S. it's only 9 justices, and these are lifetime appointments. So most Supreme Court justices serve until they pass away, as the late Justice Ginsburg did, or they retire in their later years. And this, of course, determines the balance of the court in determining several judicial reviews, the power of the Supreme Court that most people are familiar with. And in recent years, a lot of the hot button issues, such as DACA or the deferment of deportation against undocumented immigrants who came to the U.S. as children, and also reproductive rights, also abortion rights. These hot button issues have been voted on by the Supreme Court in very narrow margins, 5-4 often, or even 6-3. And with DACA, for instance, there was a ruling in June where it was 5-4, with Chief Justice John Roberts siding with the progressive justices. So this is certainly something that's on the back of people's minds. And even before Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, polls showed that this was the third most important issue, the balance of the Supreme Court, according to a Pew Research Center survey. Now, after Justice Ginsburg passed away, Democrats reportedly had a record number of contributions to several progressive candidates and causes, something like something like 90 million in just over 24 hours. Whether this translates to votes, we don't know yet, but certainly the passing of a Supreme Court justice who was so beloved by Democrats makes something that's usually just rhetorical and also something in the realm of speculation into something that's real and front and center, Akansha.
Absolutely, Nova, and I'm sure even Indians watching our show right now will actually agree on the kind of crucial and important role that the judiciary has to play in any country, especially in India and the United States. Now, having said that, I'm going to come back to you for another topic that we are going to discuss today on the show, and that's going to be the presidential debates. We're just days away from the first of the presidential debates, and the moderator, Chris Wallace, has revealed the topics for September 29. The focus of the debate will remain on issues that have dominated the news cycle throughout 2020. The first debate will take place in Cleveland, in Ohio, a state that swung twice for the Democrats in 2008 and 2012, but swung to Republicans in the last election in 2016. Let's now have a closer look at the debate topics and the nominees' previous opinions. WION's VOA's Steve Reddish looks at the campaign road ahead. Let's have a look.
This election will decide whether we save the American dream or whether we allow a socialist agenda to demolish our cherished destiny.
I think that we can expect to see a rowdy debate between the two presidential candidates.
Jennifer Murcia is a communications professor at Texas A&M University. She says both Biden and Trump are fighters.
And he isn't shy to do that, to mock people or to bully them during a debate. He did that in 2016. And with Joe Biden, what we've seen from him, he sort of has a longer history of doing debates in politics. And what we've seen from him is that he's very willing to stand his ground. We saw in 2012 that his vice presidential debate was similarly, I think, to Trump in style, in that he sort of mocked his opposition a little bit.
Presidential debates have largely kept to a format of the candidates answering questions from a moderator.
It is actually informative to see both candidates in contrast to one another. So to hear how they speak, the tone they use, but also to hear about their policies. It allows them to directly accuse one another of doing things, and it also allows them to make rebuttals so that they can defend themselves.
Whether viewership this year tops the estimated 84 million Americans who watched the first debate in 2016, it is questionable how many voters it will sway.
A lot of the research on presidential debates have shown that it kind of lets people identify with the candidate that they kind of already identify with. It just kind of lets them see who shares their positions, right? There's not a lot of evidence per se that it changes, presidential debates change minds.
I really think that, for these debates to have any kind of effect like they should, the audience itself has a responsibility to listen with an open mind.
According to Pew Research, 10% of 2016 voters said they decided their vote during or just after the debates.
And let's go back to Nova Purwadi, who's joining me from Washington, D.C. live at this hour. Nova, how crucial are these debates in determining the outcome of the elections?
Now, our report, Akansha, showed that around 10% of voters are undecided until during or not long after the debates. That kind of also corresponds to several polls done on who is still undecided with fewer than 40 days to the elections. According to a recent poll by NBC News and the Wall Street Journal, this number, the number of undecided voters is around 11%. So around the same as 2016, perhaps. Although another poll by several Midwestern universities puts the number at closer to 6%. Polling seems to indicate that a lot of voters have kind of solidified their positions by September, a little earlier on than previous voting cycles. But we'll see the schedule that we have lined up for this year's presidential and vice presidential presidential debates. 3 presidential debates, 1 vice presidential debate. The first one is going to be September 29th, next Tuesday, and that is going to be in Cleveland. And the second debate is going to be the vice presidential, actually, with Kamala Harris and Mike Pence debating in Salt Lake City, Utah. And after that, there's going to be another debate on the 15th in Miami, in the state of Florida. And this is going to take the form of a town hall style debate where the audience gets to ask questions. Right. We'll see whether this is virtual or in person because of the pandemic. Right. And as for whether debates impact people's votes, we can see that this certainly started to impact elections after they were televised. It is famous that in the 1960 elections, the debate between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon gave the momentum to JFK because he was so polished and so telegenic and so articulate, whereas Richard Nixon was rather sloppy in the eyes of many voters, and that swung, the vote to JFK.
Very well said.
But it seems like
very well said.
And it seems like a lot of.
Yes. Go ahead. Finish that bit.
Oh no! It seems like, especially when there's an incumbent, when there's an incumbent involved in the debate, it seems to be always a rehash of the famous 1980 debate when Ronald Reagan famously asked, "Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago?" And there's, and we'll expect to see something like that. In the upcoming debate of Joe Biden perhaps asking and Donald Trump asking voters, are you better off 4 years
it's
now
interesting to see how you've gone down history to actually quote some very interesting examples. We have so much to talk about, Nova, but I'm running short of time. So I leave you with the last question. With about 5 weeks to go, what can we expect in the days ahead?
Well, because as I always mention, this is not a popularity contest. National polls barely mean anything. President Trump is behind in most of those national polls by about 7%. We have to look at the swing states. And as things stand now, it's such a razor-thin margin in several of the states. I'll mention a few. North Carolina and Florida, Joe Biden is ahead by 0.8% on average. By the average of several state polls. And in Georgia, President Trump is only leading by 0.2%. That's how swingy these states are in the upcoming elections. Now, of course, Akansha, the next time I see you will be in October. And in the US, there's kind of a tradition of an October surprise, which is basically a last-minute revelation that could be damaging either to the incumbent or to the other challenger or to any of the candidates. And this can sometimes upend a presidential election in terms of who is favored to win.
Right.
But 2020 just feels like a long October surprise with the pandemic, the economic devastation wrought by it, and also social and racial unrest. So we'll see what happens and pay close attention to those battleground states, Akansha.
The battleground states, that's the key word over here. Thank you so much, Nova, for sharing all those precious insights. I can't wait for the big October surprise. Let's see what will we have as a surprise this year. Thank you so much for joining us on this live cast. See you next week.